It's time to raise Iansan. With her, there probably won't be too much farming, honestly. I'm quite sure the only thing we're gonna need is some of those chunks, the Dracolites here. We farmed all of her boss before the version dropped, but let's just see how far we can get her before doing anything, I suppose. There's 60, level 70, and yeah, I think we're pretty much good. We're just going to farm all of them, and then I think we can just like straight shot her all the way to 90. Beep. Beep. I switched to clicks at one point because we have an electrician over right now, and I don't want them to hear like some dude screaming beep in his office. So, but he's in the basement now checking some stuff. Beep. Still trying to hold back on the beeps though. Beep. I'm a little too self-conscious for the full force. Beep. Oh, was that it? Oh no, there's one underground. Ah, 3 more. Actually a lot down here. Beep. All right, we should be good for level 90 now. Let's go ahead and do that. Attack on Ascension makes sense for her because she's, you know, an attack buffer and all based on her attack. Speaking of which, now that she's level 90, I'd say now's a good time to do the good old Talents Constellation overview. Iansan's normal attacks are unimportant for the most part. In combination with her skill though, it gets a little more interesting. Her Swift Stormflight is a special charge attack that she can cast while in the Night Soul state. If performed after her elemental skill, this attack is triggered via a normal attack, much faster, and doesn't use stamina. Once per skill cast. Oddly familiar. Her elemental skill itself deals damage, gives her 54 Night Soul points, which is enough to totally fill her bar, and she'll enter the Night Soul state. While in the Night Soul state, she has increased movement. You know I like my side-by-sides, so here's that. Starting with whatever is running but not sprinting, like a light jog or something. Then, if you hold sprint, she goes a lot faster. Compared to non-Night Soul state sprinting Iansan, it's no contest. One thing I was curious about, since Varesa and Iansan have very similar movement tech, who's faster? Iansan can't sprint for quite as long though, since using her elemental skill takes her out of the Night Soul state, while Varesa's gives her more points to use. Anyway, moving on to the core of her kit, her burst. Upon using it, she'll deal damage, gain 15 Night Soul points, enter the Night Soul state, provide an attack buff to the active character, and summon a scale. Out of all of that, the most important thing is the attack buff, and how effective it is depends on Iansan's current Night Soul points. At 41 or less, it'll be based on her attack and her current Night Soul points. At 42 or more, it's purely based on her attack. You'd think being based on 2 things is better than 1, however, even in the best case where she's at 41 Night Soul points, it equates to 20.5% of her attack versus 27% of her attack at 42 or more, so it's best to try and keep her Night Soul points above that. And that's where the scale comes in. While active, for those 12 seconds after burst, the scale takes note of the active character's movement, and each second, Iansan recovers Night Soul points based on that. I'll test a bit later to see how movement actually translates into Night Soul points, but that's how it works. Her first passive gives her a buff after performing that special charge attack we talked about earlier, the one you can do quickly after an E skill. For 15 seconds, she'll gain a 20% attack boost and recover an extra Night Soul point when the burst scale dude gives her some. That jumps to 4 extra points if the active character has used or recovered Night Soul points, but that has a cooldown of 2.8 seconds. Her second passive adds healing to her kit. For 10 seconds after a Night Soul burst happens, she'll heal the active character every 2.8 seconds, but only if Iansan had obtained Night Soul points in that time, so mostly after her burst. Sadly, the healing is quite supplementary, at 60% of her attack, only to the active character, and only once per almost 3 seconds. If you need a real healer in your team, this probably won't cut it. We mostly went over her movement already. She's very much like Varesa, she runs fast, and her in-Natlan swap mechanic is also pretty much the same. She'll start in Sonic mode with some Night Soul points. Her utility passive unfortunately only works in Natlan, regaining some Phlogiston if the bar drops below 50% once per 10 seconds. Moving on to Constellations, which might be more relevant as she's a 4-star, but I guess I should note, I only have C2 Iansan after 260 pulls, so your mileage may vary. C1 provides 15 energy for every 6 Night Soul points she uses. With its 18-second cooldown, we can just say she gets 15 energy every 18 seconds. With a somewhat high burst cost of 70, this is welcome though. C2 removes the need to do the special charge attack, as she'll just automatically enter the same buff state after burst, as well as providing an extra 30% attack buff. This is where she really starts to compete with Bennett, but we'll talk more about that later. C3 unfortunately is skill talents, which is quite unimportant. C4 helps her stay above the 42 Night Soul point target. After the active character does their burst, while Iansan's scale is active, the next 2 times her scale provides Night Soul points, she'll gain 4 extra. If she's at or near her 54 point cap, half of the overflow will be preserved for next time. C5, actually good, it's burst levels, which increases her attack buff cap. Also, C6 is very nice. It essentially extends her burst and thus attack buff duration from 12 to 15 seconds, as well as providing a 25% damage buff to the active character if any Night Soul point overflow happens. items. With C4 and a reasonably mobile main DPS, this should be easy to trigger consistently, which is important with its 3-second duration. So yeah, we will get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty a little later, but that's how she works in a nutshell. One last thing we got to do is raise her talents. By far, her burst is the most important, so we're going to start with that, mainly because it raises the max attack bonus she can provide. But I will at least start with raising her skill to 6. I don't think I'm going to bother with her normal attack. Me personally, I'm not really going to be looking at her damage potential, just what she can provide to the team, as she is a support. In terms of build, unlike Bennett, she actually uses her entire attack for the attack bonus, so it's not necessarily just whatever has the highest base attack, but whatever has the highest attack total. Like Calamity Queller, for example, because she has the attack cap there, it might be a little overkill, but yeah, massive base, more attack here, and a lot more attack on the passive, which seems to work really well in her case because when she's off field, the attack bonus you get from the passive is doubled, and she will be off field most of the time. Some math would need to be done to see if we could get away with like a Favonius Lance. At level 8 with a 610 attack bonus cap, and assuming we can stay at high Nightsoul points, she would need a little less than 4 times this number, so around 2400 attack in her case. To see if Favonius Lance could work, we should at least get it to level 90. So let's go ahead and max it out real quick. We're at 565 base attack, which is actually pretty decent. She will of course need energy recharge as well. The burst is the most important thing about her. We have 822 base attack. I want to see how close we can get to 2400 with, you know, just her, so it doesn't matter what kind of team or buffs we have. As an Outland character that will be in Nightsoul mode, I do think Cinder City is going to be far and away her best set. We are going to start her off with just triple attack and see what she looks like then. And a crit rate roll. Okay, so yeah, this one was actually really good. Let's go ahead and finish it off there. We got a def. Whatever, it's fine. With Favonius, those are like her 3 most important stats. Without Favonius, I don't think she really cares about crit rate, and it rolled super well, no def at all. And sure, for now, we'll just steal this Flower of Life. Oh, look at that. We're already at 2600. So even without any attack buffs from any team members or anything else, we actually have enough to max the attack buff already. To be exact, 27% of 2648 is 715. The question is, what about when we crown it or get her to C5? 2 things that are almost guaranteed to happen at one point. At crown, we're still fine as it's this 690 here, which becomes her max attack bonus. However, at crown plus C5, we don't have enough attack anymore. We would then need exactly 3000 attack to max out this bonus. In our current build, getting 50% attack bonus from anywhere would be enough. Iansan's own first passive already gives her 20%, and then just being in a certain team like Overloaded bumps that up to 45 already, which honestly 50% was kind of generous. That would be enough to get her to 3000. So yeah, even with Favonius Lance, it should be pretty easy to reach that 3000 attack, at least in triple attack artifacts. If you were to go something like Calamity Queller, you should be able to easily get away with like giving her an energy recharge sands or even building her more sub DPS-y if you wish. And it's not like we have insane attack subs on our Flower and Plume anyway, 5.3 here and 9.9 there, so I do, of course, want to talk about Bennett as well. He's very relevant to this conversation, being an attack buffer himself, and basically the best attack buffer since the start of the game. Without going into constellations, Bennett still provides more attack than Iansan. Granted, he has the highest base attack weapon he can have. Interestingly, for bows and swords, 674 is the current highest. For every other weapon type, it's 741. I assume that'll change at one point though, making Bennett's attack boost even bigger. He buffs 119% of his base attack with no cap. The highest base attack a Benny can have is 865. Which ends up being a flat 1029 attack buff, over 200 more than a maxed Iansan. However, when we include constellations and other nuance, it becomes more complicated. Bennett C1 makes his attack buff jump to 1202, so the gap just widened further. Besides the mentioned C5, he tacks on a 15% pyro damage bonus, so obviously good if you have a pyro DPS, else not really. So in a nutshell, a max Benny provides 1200 to attack and 15% pyro damage bonus. No matter what you do, 810 attack is the most she can provide, which is almost 400 less than Benny. However, her C2 and C6 can make that a lot closer. We can't put a flat number on the 30% attack because it depends on the base attack of whoever's on field. I'd say most attack scaling 5-star DPSs with their signature weapon have roughly 1000 base attack, some a little more, some a little less, but we can say roughly 300 extra attack from C2, which means she's actually already at 1100 versus Bennett's 1200. With C6, she provides a generic 25% damage bonus, so it's like the pyro bonus but for all elements, including physical. And I would say the biggest thing separating these two is the fact Bennett spawns a stationary circle, her attack buff follows the active character. Even a max Iansan though does come with at least one issue, and that is your main DPS, the one that's going to be out on field, needs to be a mobile one, like a plunge DPS or Kinich, just someone who's moving around a lot. That is something we have yet to really look into and test, but that seems to be her main drawback. One other potential drawback is that she's Electro versus Bennett's Pyro. Pyro Resonance is very good for its 25% attack, and it's of course much easier when Bennett counts for half of that. I mean, Electro Resonance isn't useless, you know, you can run your team with a little less energy, but in most cases, it's still not as good as 25% attack. We can't really put a number on the benefit that the attack boost follows you instead of being a static ring, because even then it depends on the content and the team. Some teams, you don't really need to move that much and the circle is fine. In some content, you have enemies spawning here and there, and then you do Benny's burst, and then boom, enemies go somewhere else and you have to follow them, and now you're out of the ring. That's happened to me more times than I can count. So much like Kazuha versus Zelonin, it's not so simple to say one is better or worse than the other. In terms of just like raw buffing ability, they're actually pretty close once both maxed. If I ever get her to C6, then sure, we'll do some actual in-game comparisons. I just don't think it's fair right now. Anyway, back to build. I guess we are gonna stick with Favonius Lance. Let's make sure we have definitely enough crit rate. I usually would talk about alternative weapons, but Favonius has been here since the beginning. It's hard to imagine many people don't have it lying around. This one we recently got from the event though, gives a decent amount of attack as well because of the passive, 20%. But yeah, considering Favonius Lance is already enough just because of its, you know, higher than average base attack, I don't really see why you'd go anything else unless you want to like not run triple attack. I think we'll start with her at C0, and I'm actually going to give her an off-piece flower, I suppose, some more energy recharge. We're at 185. C1, of course, would help with that. It's 15 energy less she needs per burst, per rotation. It has an 18-second cooldown, but so does her burst, so it doesn't really matter. Before we just start slamming some bosses, though, I do want to understand a bit closer how she works and how this scale stuff works, so we're just going to start with testing that. We'll just head to an Abyss stage because we start with full energy, which is nice. And then we swap to Ito, and we'll just keep moving around, and you can see her Nightsoul points over there going up. Just walking around is not enough to actually sustain. Go to Ito, and this time sprint. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's still not enough to completely sustain. This is obviously not that good of a test. I mean, we're not triggering her passive where she recovers some extra points. What if we were to use a much more ideal companion, Varesa? Plunging is considered movement, and because she's a Natlan character, if we were to actually do her thing here, there's that special charge attack and then burst, and then just start plunging away. We'll see what happens with that. So yeah, now you can see we are very consistently, even though we're just kind of attacking air here, at full Nightsoul points. So with Varesa, it works very easily, actually, even at C0. This is probably one of the best case scenarios though, because yeah, she is just zooming around. Her E makes her dash forward. She is plunging like crazy fast. And because Varesa's a Natlan character, Iansan's recovering more energy. One team I really wanted to try Iansan in though was my Kinich team. My one issue is that just replacing Benny with Iansan, we lose Pyro Resonance, which is a shame, 25% attack. I am hoping that her small amount of Electro doesn't mess up burning, but I guess we'll see. Before C2, I guess we gotta do E, normal, and then burst. So honestly, shouldn't be too bad. E, normal, burst, and then we go to Kinich, and we'll see what goes on there. We are currently in the mode, you know? So we are zooming around enough, it seems. I wasn't really able to keep an eye on Iansan's bar, but I imagine it was still pretty good. We might have to switch some things up once we get Iansan to C4 because I do not naturally do Kenich's burst, which would be required for, you know, the extra Nightsoul points here. Again, wouldn't be necessary until C6. Then of course we do want to try and overflow at least once every 3 seconds to sustain the 25% damage buff. At C6, because its duration is increased, maybe we have her, you know, come a little earlier. She is not C6 though, so I don't care right now. I'm honestly not really looking at like Kenich's damage versus what I'm used to with Benny because again, it's just not fair right now. Naturally, I think a Varesa team would be very interesting. Varesa is still built the same way for raising mode. So let's check that out. We're just going to, you know, keep doing the stuff. There's the Apex Burst. Boom. I mean, this is just like a Varesa showcase now. Apex Burst. Oh, I guess that was one thing. We just went to the character screen kind of at the end of the battle here, and we can see she has over 3,000 attack now. So in this specific team situation, whatever, even at C6 crown, we have enough attack. Also, energy recharge seems to be no issue, even at C0, even without that 15 energy. So I guess we're good in that department as well. I'm not sure like trying different teams and such makes much sense. That's kind of how it always is when it comes to supports because they are in the background just buffing. Like what are you supposed to see with them? It's probably more worth just talking about, you know, units that can pair well with her. Naturally high movement units, which would include plunging DPSs, like Gaming I think would work well. He was present in her trial run, which makes sense. Bennett was also there, which kind of brings up a good point that just because they are kind of the same doesn't mean you can't use them both together if you need 2000 attack for whatever reason. I guess one thing to ponder is that if you have Xian Yun, pretty much anyone can be a plunging DPS, and plunging is considered like good movement for her Night Soul point recovery or her scale thing. My Theory Crafter friend mentioned Hu Tao at one point, but I would have to catch up on his messages. From what I've seen so far, I feel like it would be a little close. I mean, she is, you know, dashing all around, all over the place. The bad thing is I'm not that good at animation cancels, so, you know, could be this doesn't really mean anything. So let's see here. Nope, yeah. Oh wait, actually, she is totally enough. Look at that. Iansan still has full energy, even though I'm like doing everything as bad as possible. Hu Tao is definitely good. What the hell? She moves way more than I thought, lol. I think for the most part though, she does pair best with other Natlan characters because it is kind of built into her kit. But I guess, you know, some other characters can be perfectly fine as well. They move enough. But yeah, I think overall she's an excellent addition to the game. Definitely a little more niche than Bennett, but in the right team, not having to be totally restricted to a circle is a nice feeling. Let me know what you think about her in the comments down below though. Thanks, as always, for watching, and until next time.